But there's some light rust on my barrel that you might be able to pick up in this video. I'm going to do a complete takedown and clean. Now this is at the end of my takedown screw, but it's set in there pretty good, so I can probably just loosen that up. So you don't have to remove this pumpkin puncher from your barrel. There we go. And there's also some light rust on my magazine tube, if you can see that in the frame there. That's going to have to be dealt with. Okay, you can probably see some surface rust there. I'm just going to knock that out with a bit of steel wool. It's just surface rust. You don't want it to go deeper though. You want to knock that stuff out when you see it. Now that the surface rust has been removed from this barrel, I'm going to go ahead and re-blue the barrel. You just basically wipe the stuff on and let it dry and do another application. And I usually do 3 to 4 coats of bluing, just so it takes, once that dries, put a light coating of oil on it. And now, since I got the barrel re-blued, oiled, and cleaned, I need to address this issue here with the this light coating of rust on the surface. That's just surface rust. But a lot of people overlook the magazine tube because it's underneath the forestock, and it really doesn't get a good cleaning. So that's going to be also done while I do a complete takedown. But in order to do the takedown, which removes this pin here for the trigger group, I do have to get to that Allen bolt at the back there. This has to entirely come off in order to do that. And now that this barrel is dried from the bluing process, I'm going to hit it with some CLP quite liberally. Now this pin here is what you want to push out, so you can take even a small screwdriver and just push that through. Just like that. And then you can remove your trigger group. A couple things will pop out, don't be alarmed. These will come out. Next, you want to take the bolt out. Okay, now we can get this forestock off. We got the barrel, the magazine tube actually accessible. I'm going to probably do some really good sanding on that and re-blue that. But we want to remove a few things here. And this is going to get a good clean, because a lot of times you get a lot of buildup of carbon and oil residue. So those areas need to be addressed. So I'm going to take out the elevator here. There's two. It sets in there with a couple of roll pin like things. And that comes out. Sounds like the neighbors are arguing. And this should slide through the front. That's going to get a good clean as well, because you can see how grimy that sucker gets. So, and there's your safety. It'll stay on there. You can unscrew this, but you can just very well keep it on there and work with it. So I'm going to sand that down and get it re-blued. So what I'm going to do is just really coat these parts with some CLP and let it soak in. And just let that rest for a while, and then I'll get to scrubbing. So on this magazine tube, I'm just going to go over it with steel wool. If I see that this rust is a little deeper than surface rust, I might take some 600 grit sandpaper and get down into the surface, lift those rust areas out, and then re-blue it. But I'll start with some really fine steel wool at first. Yeah, this hasn't been re-blued in a while, so it really needs it. 600 grit sandpaper out, or a sanding block like this, which is probably about 400 grit. So I got the 600 grit, but I'm not going to use water. No. I'm going to take it down almost to all the bluings, like it's getting all of this off of here. So I really want to get down into that deeper rust area, in here especially. With a shotgun this old, 26, 27 years old, you really sometimes have to just, you know, redo stuff, especially the bluing. You don't want surface rust to penetrate very deep at all. You'll start get pitting. It'll weaken the structure of the metal. That's looking pretty good. So now I'm going to take a clean cloth and wipe. I shouldn't see any rust come off there, any brown color. All I see is a little bit of that gray, the bluing dust. So I'm down to just about the surface. Now I'll start rebluing. My next step here before I blue this magazine tube is I want to get all the oils off the surface that I can, so that the bluing will penetrate and not just lay over a little bit of oil and not go all the way through into the metal. So get that cleaned off, dried off with some rubbing alcohol. Now it's time to blue. Let's take a couple folded patches and just start bluing. Let it dry and repeat. I'll probably do about 5 coats. Now that's about 6 coatings or 6 applications of super blue. Not super glue, super blue. So my next step is some CLP. I like to use that instead of oil. So I'm going to go ahead and hit a clean piece of cloth and coat that with the CLP. Now that's reblued and oiled up, but an often overlooked piece of cleaning a shotgun, especially the Mossberg 500, is the fore-end stock. That gets a lot of rust in there that people don't realize is deep into the metal, and it transfers onto the magazine tube. So I'm going to give that a really good clean, and I'll probably blue or re-blue some of these extenders here. But before I address the issue of the fore-end stock here, I'm going to clean the inside of this receiver, give it a good scrub with a toothbrush, and wipe it down. It's also going to make assembly a lot easier. And done. Now I'll set this aside and address the fore-end stock. What I'll do is take the shotgun cleaner, and it's not the same diameter, but I'm just going to rub through there and try and break off as much rust as possible. It's looking good. Next, what I'll do is get some steel wool, kind of ball it up, and I'm going to run it through there. And drive it all the way through to the end. And then repeat that maybe 3 or 4 more times. You're not going to get all the rust out of it. It's just not possible unless you had some kind of rotary, you know, like a cylinder hone. You know, you're not going to get all of it, but you're going to get a good majority of it. And then by rebluing it and then oiling it, you're going to keep the rust maintenance down quite a bit. And you won't be having it transferred to your magazine tube every time. I did the same thing with this as I did with the barrel and the magazine tube. I did some rubbing alcohol, get as much oils off there as you can. And now I'm just going to reblue as much of this as I can. inside blued. I'm just going to run this through there to the end, and then just keep running it through. Put more bluing on it, and that should protect the metal pretty good. It's looking a lot better than it did. Now that this is blued as much as can be, I'm going to coat it with some CLP. And just let it sit for a little bit, then wipe it out a tiny bit. And the trigger group hasn't been cleaned in quite a long time. Now, I'm not going to use CLP. What I'm going to use is M-Pro 7. It's a little less harsh of a petroleum-based type solvent, and I'm just going to spray into that entire area, let it soak in, and then I'm going to use my air compressor and just blow out all the residue. Alright, you might notice my lighting changed a little bit here, but what I'm going to do is take my air compressor and just remove the residual. I'll first just wipe it down with a cloth. Safety always. Put your eye protection on when you're working with compressed air. So now the trigger housing or trigger group is all cleaned out, and what I didn't show in this video is I reblued some areas that have wear from just trigger pull and whatnot. So that's good to go. Reset that trigger and set that aside with the rest of the parts. So with owning a firearm, it's a good idea to know how to disassemble your weapon and how to keep it maintained and cleaned. What you might have to do with a weapon that you've owned 10, 15, 20 years is do a full breakdown and address issues. Reblue, protect that metal. I'm probably going to reblue everything that's steel. Now for cleaning the bolt. It's been soaking with some CLP. I'm going to hit it with a little bit more. Oops. I hate when that happens. This one there's no moving parts, so just recoat, and then I'm going to take my cut off toothbrush and just scrub the hell out of this thing, because as long as I've had this Mossberg 500, which was originally for duck hunting, and that was in very wet environments, it has held up freaking extremely well. I get a bit of surface rust once in a while, and that's about it. But yeah, owning a firearm, it's a good idea to, you know, learn how to break down everything. I could break this down even farther with the pins in here, but it doesn't look like it needs it. Just a good scrub. That's far cleaner than it was. Alright, my overall assessment. The bluing on the barrel took perfectly. That looks beautiful. Magazine tube. That looks awesome. Let's see. The elevator was actually the best. That turned out very dark. I like that. I may do the bolt action later on, but now it's time for assembly. Also the trigger group, nice and clean, nice and oiled, and time to reassemble. This is the hardest part, actually. So we're going to start from first to last. So the last is the barrel. We'll set that aside for now, and also the buttstock and the fore-end grip and the trigger group. So, oh, and this added on dandy. Okay, first off, placing the elevator in there. These two sides kind of squeeze, and I just go into these open holes on the sides of the receiver. It's a little tricky to get it lined up at first, but it should go in there right like that. The next thing you want to do is place your fore-end stock in there, and there's a couple guides that need to line up there. so that it goes in like that. Take your bolt and slide it up through the opening there, and it's going to catch on a slide and kind of slide back like this. The tricky part is lining up your fore-end stock with the bolt so that this piece can go on next. Okay, there's an alignment that you need to bear in mind. When I pull the forestock back, you can see this bar that has an indent here. It needs to be just below here in order for the top piece of the bolt carrier, or the bolt group, if you want to call it that, to slide right in there. Now, getting it to line is somewhat of a bitch. You may have to fiddle with this to get it aligned. So what I do is I just kind of push and pull and use the front slide foregrip to get it aligned. That's aligned. That bar there should seat, and that whole bolt group is seated now. So the next step is to place in. Okay, this next part, the extractor, goes right into the side here. There's a hole for that to pop in place. Might have to line it a little bit. And that should hold in place. The other side goes just right in there. Now you can put your trigger group in. Okay, here I have the bolt pushed as forward as I can. What you're going to find is these two sidebars here are going to hold you up with getting this trigger assembly in, because they're going to want to spread to the side. This does take a little bit of finesse to do, but just about got it. And there we go. That's in. So the next part I'm going to do is put the barrel on and the collapsing buttstock, and then most importantly I'm going to dry fire and cycle the action. Before you fire this at a range, you want to make sure that nothing's binding. You're not going to have a critical failure because you accidentally put a part in wrong or a pin is not in. So we'll complete this and we'll do a dry fire and cycle the action, make sure it's good to go, and then we're done. Alright, we'll put the barrel on first. Let's take the action back just a little bit. There's the barrel in there. And slide it forward and start screwing that takedown screw down. You need to bring the action back a little bit more. Seat that screw. And you can see this pumpkin puncher is on the takedown screw very, very well, so that I can tighten up this barrel mount. One more. There we go. And done. Barrel is mounted. It looks very well. All the surface rust is gone. Might coat it with a little bit of oil before I put it in storage, which isn't going to be stored well for very long because I like to shoot. Check the action and put the remaining of the buttstock on, and okay, you just want to put that trigger assembly pin back in, kind of tap it in there. I use a Phillips very small screwdriver and just get it flush with the receiver, make sure it's seated well, and now we put the buttstock on and we're done. Well, there's the Mossberg barrel reblued. Looks beautiful. Magazine tube reblued. Awesome. Everything nice and clean and ready for a dry fire. Okay, let's make sure that this weapon is good to go on the range. So we're going to load some inner snap caps. Just dry firing. Make sure everything cycles well. Yeah, think I like it. Looks great. You can see that that bluing took well on the magazine tube. That is nice. This is actually something you might have to do every once in a while with a weapon that's over 20 years old. Is just break it down, baby it, take care of it, and it's going to give you years of service. So prepper action out. I've got another few videos. I'm doing a flurry of videos this week, and be safe, and we'll see you next time.